Caught wife cheating on a dating app while acting distant and always on her phone. So I tricked her BF into coming to Christmas dinner and exposed their affair to our whole family. My wife and I were married for 2 years before I discovered she had been fooling me. First, I'll admit that I loved my wife so much, and even when I noticed signs that she was acting edgy or dressing extra, I didn't consider most of it. My wife and I first met at a mutual friend's housewarming party and clicked instantly. We had a couple of conversations, talked about regular things, what she loved and what I loved, and she was very free-spirited. She laughed at almost every joke, which I found beautiful and attractive. I also loved that she was not acting like she was out of my league like the rest of her friends did, and after we had a great time together, we went our separate ways. But before we did, we exchanged contacts, and I called her as soon as I got home that evening. We didn't talk much that first night because she went to a different location to hang out with her friends, but the next day, we talked and flowed like old-time friends. I won't lie. I wasn't single when I met my wife, my relationship was complicated, and I was going through so much with my then girlfriend. I was tired of her lies, her deception, and always playing the victim in situations she made, which was exhausting for me. So, when my then girlfriend asked that we break up, I didn't argue with her. I did this because I was already close friends with my wife, and she looked like the kind of woman that would give me the long-lasting peace I wanted, and I was right. My wife gave me the kind of peace, love, and respect I wanted, but it was short-lived. After I officially broke up, my wife was there to comfort me and spend time with me whenever she wanted to. She was a freelance graphic designer, and this gave her the flexibility to work from anywhere. I'd even invite her for the weekends, and she would work from my place, and whenever she was taking a break, we'd go out and have fun. As of that time, she was single and was looking to have fun. Aside from her 2 friends I met at the housewarming party, she didn't have other friends and didn't have much of a social life, so we became best friends, and in no time, we were madly in love with each other. Even without officially asking her out, we were almost inseparable and went everywhere together all the time. You all might call it obsession, but it wasn't. I had been yearning for a woman I could connect with and not feel insecure, and I found that in my wife. We introduced each other to our parents, and my parents loved her. She was my maternal grandmother's namesake, creating a beautiful bond between her and my mother. I had a great job, and the pay was great, but as a freelancer, she earned more than me, and I was cool with that. Despite her earning more than I did, I still took care of her. We dated for 2 years, those were the most memorable moments we had together. We traveled to different countries, mainly for sightseeing, and took 2 proper vacations within those 2 years. While we dated, my love for her and my gifting increased. On our first anniversary, I felt we were ready to take things to the next level, so I asked her to move in with me, and she was glad too. Her parents even suggested that she move in with me at the early stage of our relationship so we could get to know each other, but she refused and said she didn't want to rush things. I literally did not hold back anything from my wife. Nothing at all. I loved her wholeheartedly and did everything to make her happy. Her happiness was my priority, and I adored everything about her. I believed we were on our way to the happily ever after life, but I was very mistaken. After 2 years of dating and 1 year of living together, I popped the question, and she said yes. We had a small wedding, invited our friends and family, and had a great time. We didn't need to move into a bigger apartment, so we stayed at my old house. We didn't do 50-50 responsibility, but she contributed to it. I took care of rent, gas, and utility bills, and she took care of groceries. Remember that I mentioned at the beginning of my story that there was a time I noticed some things were off with my wife, but I didn't pay much attention to it. Well, that started after a year in our marriage. She just changed, and I could not explain why. On some days, she would be happy and all nice. The next day, she would be so cold and ignore me like we didn't live in the same house. Then she started going out more and more from being someone who didn't have friends and a solid social life. I would often return from work, and she would leave a note that said she was out to see her friends or hang out with other freelancers that lived in our city. The truth is, I was happy that she was even socializing more, and I didn't really ask detailed questions whenever she returned from her meetings. As time passed, I noticed she started caring more about her looks, applying makeup, and wearing skin-tight skimpy clothes. I was a bit concerned about the skimpy clothes she wore, and each time I talked about it, she would say I was being insecure, and I didn't like that she was exploring different options. I didn't like it when she said that, so I stopped mentioning it and allowed her to do her thing. She even started staying late whenever she went out in the evenings, and I felt she needed to unwind after sitting in front of her laptop for hours. Our bond as husband and wife also became weaker as all of this continued, and most times, she wouldn't let me touch her because she claimed she was always tired, and I tried to be an understanding husband, not knowing that my wife was cheating on me. It was until one day. We were both sitting in the living room, and she mentioned something about having insufficient space on her phone, and I advised her to clear/clean her phone. As she was doing that, in a short glance at her screen, I noticed she recently deleted a dating app, and I was curious. I tried to hold myself together and pretended I did not see everything. Later that evening, after giving her a hot dose of my husband's duties, she slept off, and I used her fingerprint to unlock her phone as she slept. I re-downloaded the app, and because her details were registered with Google, I got signed in immediately. I didn't even dig deep when I found out that my wife had been dating one not so fine guy for almost a year, and he had seen me a couple of times. I read all of their romantic conversations, and I was heartbroken to see that they mocked me whenever they talked and said many nasty things about me. I was so enraged and even thought of giving my wife a peaceful sleep, but I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in jail. So, I pretended to chat with him like it was my wife and invited her boyfriend to join us for Christmas dinner in a few days so he could meet my family, still pretending to be my wife. I told him I would travel, so we would have the whole evening to ourselves. After he agreed, I deleted the app, charged my wife's phone, and pretended all was well. In fact, I acted happier than I was the previous days, and she believed I was excited about Christmas. Long story short, on Christmas Eve, he arrived at my in-laws' home, and it was my turn to make a fool out of them. I knew the exact time he would come and open the door for him. The shock on his face was worth framing, and I pretended I didn't know him. When my wife saw him, she dropped the tray of food she was holding, and her parents suspected something was wrong. Her parents didn't know him either, but he was invited to the table to eat with us. As I ate, I began talking about a friend who recently found out his wife was cheating on him on a dating app, and he was mad and divorced her. I made the story so emotional, her parents even said the lady did not deserve a second chance, and her husband did the right thing by divorcing her. While I told the story, it was evident that my wife was finding it difficult to chew and swallow the food in her mouth, and she was sweating profusely. Her boyfriend kept touching the collar of his shirt, and it was evident that he was uncomfortable too. After beating around the bush, I told her parents that their daughter was cheating on me with the man she invited for dinner, and her parents questioned her, and they were so furious when they confirmed it. They embarrassed her boyfriend without wasting time and kicked him out of their house. Then they rained abuse on my wife, and they expressed their disappointment. I'm glad she will have to live with her parents' disappointment for the rest of her life, and she has no place in my life anymore. She tried to defend herself and said she did it because I was getting boring, and I did everything she wanted without complaints. Hearing this made her parents more furious, and they asked her to find somewhere else to sleep that day. I was so shattered that she could repay me that way, and I left their house. Later on, we divorced, and I have not seen her since. It's funny how you pour your heart out for a woman, care for her, and love her unconditionally. In the end, she takes advantage of that. Right now, I'm not ready for a relationship, and it might take a while to heal.